Let me read to you a passage from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 20, verse 20 to 28. It's the Gospel for the feast of St. James the Greater, Apostle, on July the 25th. St. Matthew writes, Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favour of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup that I am going to drink? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, You will indeed drink from my cup. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. Jesus called them together and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's from Matthew chapter 20, verse 20 to 28. It suggests thoughts about humble service. What do I mean? Well, in her book entitled Picking Up on the Streets and Behind the Trucks with the Sanitation Workers of New York City, published in 2013, anthropologist Robin Nagel looks at the work of clearing all the garbage generated by America's largest city, 11,000 tons from households each day on average. New Yorkers don't give it much attention. They leave their trash on the curb or drop it in a litter basket and promptly forget about it. Robin Nagel introduces us to the men and women of New York City's Department of Sanitation, and shows how this small army of uniformed workers is the most important labour force on the streets. As a matter of fact, for the purposes of her investigation, she joined this force herself. Her book chronicles New York's 400-year struggle with trash and traces the city's waste management efforts from a time when filth overwhelmed the streets to the far more rigorous practices of today. She accompanied crews on their routes, questioned supervisors and commissioners, and listened to story after story about blizzards, hazardous wastes, and the insults of everyday New Yorkers. The book would help anyone see the value of the obscure work of the garbage man and how the whole vast city depends on his daily service. What would happen if the city was without its garbage cleaners for 1 month? The city would be in chaos. What would happen if a very well-paid professor of ancient Syriac were not to be available for a year? Little difference would be made by his absence in the broad scheme of things, and yet the garbage man has little of the professor's status. It reminds one of the story told by, I think, Saint Josemaria Escriba, about the donkey that went round and round the stone all day, every day, keeping the stone revolving. That donkey kept the village in running water. Without the donkey's constant work, the village would be in real difficulty. The service of that dumb donkey was essential for the village. This highlights the glory of service in the life of man, and how it is that no true service does not have its grandeur. The university professor of Syriac is doing grand work if his work is pursued as a true service, and not just as a means of being served and glorified. The garbage man is doing superb work if his work is pursued as a true service. And a moment's thought by anyone ought make it plain that his work is utterly essential and worthy of all respect, protection, and due compensation. The same thing is to be said of so many spheres of humble work. The worker on the roads. Where would a modern city be were it not for the indispensable work of the road worker? The list of such persons and their service could go on and on. The constant tendency is to consider such persons and their service as the last in importance, but a little careful thought ought convince anyone that such service is not the last. On the contrary, it can be the greatest in value for the greatest number, and this obvious fact helps us to see things from God's perspective. He sees things and persons as they truly are, and a so-called high position is as nothing in his sight. Kings can render an immense service, of course. King Louis IX of France, who lived from 1214 to 1270, an almost exact contemporary of St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, was perhaps the dominant figure in 13th century Europe. He had as his aim to ensure that all persons in his kingdom got to heaven. He was a remarkable Catholic king, and with good reason was canonized by the Church. The essential thing for all is to serve, and all men have an instinctive admiration for those who serve well and for the right reason. All this introduces to us our Lord's words in today's Gospel passage that I read earlier from Matthew chapter 20, verse 20 to 28. It opens with the mother of the two of our Lord's named disciples coming to him with her sons to ask of him the favour of placing them at his right and left in his glory. They wanted a special position, and this caused indignation among the other disciples, as they were seen to be getting an unfair advantage. Our Lord in response pointed out a few basic things. It is only through suffering that glory would be attained. They had to drink the cup which he was to drink. Their love for him assured him that they would drink it, and he confirmed it. You will indeed drink from my cup. But the essential thing he emphasized was service, humble service after the manner even of a slave. Jesus called them together and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Our Lord himself came to serve unto death. He is our model. What then is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to serve, and for this we have our wonderful exemplar. Jesus Christ, the incarnate Son of God, said that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Before he ascended into heaven, he gave his disciples a mission which related to the whole world, to every man and woman of every time and place. It was to make disciples of all the nations. So all men and women are called by God to take Jesus Christ as their Lord and Master. And what example does he give to all of us? It is to serve humbly, with Christ's interests as our guide.